This is Rogers TV, North Durham, Kawartha.
The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Welcome to Modern Business. I'm your host, Taylor Bursey. This show bridges the gap between viewer and entrepreneur. Today, we are joined by Evelyn Pocock of the Underground Bake Shop located in Beaverton. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So, in your own words, can you tell us what is the Underground Bake Shop?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Underground Bake Shop is a from-scratch bakery, as you said, located in Beaverton. And it's a rustic bakery, but our favorite thing is just that we're able to make everything fresh every morning. And we also have like coffees, and we do like freezer meals and stuff like that. And we partner with other local businesses whenever we can.
And how did you get started in this business?
So it was actually a COVID project. Like I was finishing university when COVID first hit, and I came back sort of in the middle of my fourth year. Not in a degree that was even related to baking, but you know, as the world shifted and things were changing, I started baking out of the house just as something to do. And what started as like, just like, you know, I'll bake these things and I'll give them to neighbors or to friends or to whomever else, suddenly that was like growing. People were talking about it, and what was people I knew became like a friend of a friend of a friend, and eventually this little like business sort of came upon me. It wasn't really something I'd planned. And the name was just like something my sister and I came up with to make it a little bit more valid and to give it a bit of credit, but it wasn't anything that we ever expected to become like a full brick and mortar.
Right.
And then that sort of grew and grew, and I started working in a coffee shop in Toronto where I was living at the time. And as that went, my business continued to grow. So I was working like a full day at the coffee shop in Toronto, and then I would come home and I would bake like in the evenings and on weekends. And eventually it just sort of hit a point where I couldn't really do both. So my family sort of sat me down and they said, okay, you know, what do you want to do? Do you want to do this? But either you need to go into the career that you studied and went to school for, or you need to cut something somewhere because it just wasn't viable to be doing, you know, all hours working just all the time.
Right.
And like very much burning the candle on both ends. And so I decided, like, you know what, I think I want to give this a go. And it was very scary and very emotional, but I had like the full support of my family behind me, which really like helped sort of prop me up and give me the courage to go forward with this. And, you know, it was like a couple months later, we were able to find a space, and I left my job and I moved to Beaverton, and, you know, the whole thing sort of went from there.
That seems like it was almost a whirlwind of a journey.
100%. Like I left my job in Toronto in May, and we opened the doors to Underground in August. And
wow.
Yeah, and in that time we did all of the construction, we sourced all of the parts, we bought all the appliances, we got all of our permits, all of our inspections, all, you know, absolutely everything we needed. And the doors opened and we just sort of like flew by the seam of our pants.
So literally a whirlwind.
Oh yeah.
But it sounds like you've had an incredible journey up to this point. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of that journey, what were you going to school for before you decided to pursue this?
So I was actually going to school for animal science with the intention of eventually getting into like veterinary medicine or vet tech or something related.
So you did a full pivot.
Yeah, yeah. We joke all the time that, like, you know, really ideally there shouldn't be any correlation between what I studied and what I do now. And there were a couple courses that I took that sort of like lended themselves to my job now, which we never would have expected, but it was just one of those like serendipitous things.
I love that. And yeah, who knows, maybe you'll move into a line of animal treats or
yeah, exactly. Maybe that'll
that.
be like, you know, where I draw the bridge for sure.
Very cool. So talk to us about opening the brick and mortar. Your family sits you down and says, Evelyn, pick which way you're going. Mm-hmm. You decide to invest in yourself and invest in your business. What was the experience like finding the storefront? How did you pay for the storefront? How did it all come together?
Yeah, so it was a number of things, and a lot of things I will be like fully transparent about were luck and were situational, because when we first started looking for the space that we were going to use, I visited a couple places, and I don't know, they weren't right, or they were going to require a lot more renovation than I was comfortable with, or sometimes it was very specific to like the landlord-tenant deal, like everyone has different conditions. And in the end, it was a word of mouth from a realtor we knew to somebody else that they knew of somebody who had a building and had an adjacent unit that they, you know, were flexible with. And from there, like, you know, everything was just so incredible. I met a landlord who's also a woman who's also run her own business for 20 years. She was totally on board for my idea and my vision. She was comfortable letting me do like whatever renovations I wanted to the space. And she didn't actually start charging rent until I opened, which is like, yeah, you never find that anywhere. So all of that was like, you know, the stars really aligned for me to be able to do it the way that I did. And then when it came to actually like purchasing the big ticket items, like I was really lucky. My dad works in construction, so we built our counters, we built like as many things as we could in the house. Like we did our own painting, that sort of thing. But I mean, like the dish sanitizer, the oven, the fridges, all of that had to, you know, be financed still. And I had a little bit of savings, but I mean, keep in mind, I'd been a student, you know, a year and a half previous, like there wasn't a lot of time for saving. So most of it came from a private loan that I, you know, applied for and was a recipient of.
Excellent.
Yeah, and so that was fantastic because a lot of the, and not very many people would know this unless they were going through it themselves, a lot of the appliances can come with like finance plans, so that probably would have been an option as well. But to be able to get a lump sum and then work my budget within that worked a lot better for me than, say, financing several items over a long span of time.
It seems like you put a lot of thought into how you were going to invest in your space and build it up. But the first thought I have when I think of the storefront and you coming from Toronto at the time is, why Beaverton?
Yeah, so that's actually a totally fair question. We get that all the time. So while I grew up in Toronto, my family's always had a cottage or a place, or, you know, going back, like my grandparents and my grandparents' always had a place on Lake Simcoe. And when I was like maybe 2 or 3, my parents got their place in Beaverton, and we just fell in love with the town. Like all of my weekends were there, my summers were there, every break from school, there, like all of our holidays, any chance we could be there, we were. And so in a lot of ways, it was because I was already attached to the town, but there were also a lot of like very pragmatic reasons. Like it was a lot more affordable than being in the city. For whatever reason, you know, one of those other things that I'll just chalk up to luck, the town hadn't had a bakery in 20 or 30 years, and I happened to be the first one to be able to get there. And some of it was just like personal social capital too. I appreciated that whenever I did open my doors, that I knew a couple people. I could rely on some friends and friends of friends to support me in the early days, or to tell somebody, you know, this place is here and you should go, rather than being like a completely blank slate in a place I'd never heard of.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I don't think anybody listening to this would blame you for leveraging things like social capital, because that's just smart business if you want to be successful. So you find the storefront, you find obviously the location, you have the plan in your mind, but did you actually sit down and make a business plan during this whirlwind time, or have you been winging it from the start?
No, so I did, I mean, like, yes to both. Yes, I made a business plan. That's actually how I was able to get my loan, because part of that involves like the really nitty gritty of what are my break-even points, what do I expect, what are the costs that I know right off the front. All of these things need to be sort of figured out before you can even try to approach something. But then so much of it really was like, okay, let's just see how it goes. Let's just try this. Let's just make the mistake and then get over it, you know?
Right. And with that in mind, you know, you've thought out the business plan, you opened the bakery, you mentioned you went to school for animal
science. Yeah.
How did you even know how to bake? Where did you learn that?
Excellent question. So I was really lucky. I grew up in a home with a family that loved food. And my mom is the one who, like, she just, you know, she makes this incredible dinner every night. She makes breakfast, lunch, whatever. And she's an incredibly talented cook. And so she taught me much more than just the cooking. It was more so the love of food. and the way that food can bring people together, and like the history surrounding that, and the abundance that can be brought with the right elements of a dish. So it was an unconventional sort of approach to cooking, but one that was so much more heartfelt than just we are going to put the elements of these things together and this is going to create this dish. But I don't know, maybe it was just me. She's a really good cook, but she doesn't bake.
Okay.
So that was sort of where I could slide in. I was the baby of the family, so not a lot of responsibility was thrown my way, but I could bake. So I've been baking since I was like 3 or 4, and I get a little bit better at it every year. But it's also, a lot of it has to do with the current, like my current generation, and like how accessible information is. So if I want to learn a technique, like my ability to be able to hop on YouTube or Masterclass or any number of resources and learn firsthand through something like that has been an incredible resource. And that's where I think I've learned a lot of my like really technical elements.
And I think that's a really great thing to highlight, especially for the premise of this show, is because that is so accessible to our generation, and we are able to learn things from all over the world by just our fingertips. It's incredible, and you can become fully qualified in something from the information that you find online. But what's truly amazing about this is you built your career off of that.
Yeah.
It's totally incredible.
Thank you.
So with that in mind, you've honed your skills, you're baking dishes. How do you come up with a concept and a menu? Were you going to your family and friends and saying, "Hey, what are my favorite types of things?"
what are the best things? Sort of. So when I was baking out of the house, everything was made to order, and a lot of it was custom. A lot of it was people just saying like, I could really go for a lemon scone, and I was like, sure, yeah, I can figure that out. And from that was how the base of the first menu was built, out of things I already knew how to make or things I was getting requests for. And then when it came to the actual shop, I took the best things I knew how to make. I took the things that I thought I could make, that I could make in volume for something like to scale. And then I learned a really hard, really fast lesson that if you put too many things on your menu all at once, you can't keep up with it.
Right.
So we opened the doors. It was fantastic. We had just the most incredible reception, and we never could have expected it. But the problem was we were selling out like as fast as I could bake things. Even sometimes people would be buying things while they were still in the oven.
Wow.
So it was such a wild ride. And it was just me. We had no staff. My family was helping, but it was just me in the kitchen. And I suddenly was like, oh my gosh, like I've made a horrible mistake. I'm not, people are going to be disappointed because they can't get the things that they're coming for, and I can't keep up with it. So really quickly, we narrowed the menu down to just a couple things that I could keep on top of. And then sort of like one by one, we've added like staples back in, and we've always kept a rotating menu. So anytime something's in season, or if there's something that, can highlight a certain holiday or even just like an aspect of the season, we do that. So we have things that rotate on and off our menus constantly.
That's amazing, and what a great lesson to learn very early on in your journey. We will be right back. We're going to jump to commercial. We'll be right back with Evelyn from the Underground Bake Shop. Don't go anywhere.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Van Bilsen for Photos and Travel, where we bring the world to your doorstep. Traveling during this pandemic is virtually at a standstill. However, thanks to Rogers and YouTube, my new show, Photos and Travel, is heading into its second season. Join me for a new episode every month when we get together and explore exotic locales around the world. Check local listings for dates and times, or search Jonathan Van Bilsen's Photos and Travel on YouTube.
Welcome. Join me on the Rogers TV Durham for Learning Yoga in just 10 classes. My name is Sri. I'm a yoga teacher at Yoga Point, and it's my privilege to spend the next few weeks with you.
Knights of Columbus TV Bingo every Tuesday at 7 p.m. right here on Rogers TV with a guaranteed $5,000 grand prize jackpot on the full card winner. Every week, 7 p.m. Tuesdays, right here on Rogers TV.
Today, I helped a parent feed their family by connecting them to a food program.
Today, I helped someone connect with mental health supports.
Today, I helped a couple struggling to pay their bills access financial aid.
Every day, 211 navigators connect Canadians to critical government and community programs and services.
211. Help starts here.
This is Rogers TV.
Welcome back to Modern Business, the show that bridges the gap between viewer and entrepreneur. I'm your host, Taylor Bursey, and today we are joined by Evelyn Pocock, the owner and operator of the Underground Bake Shop in Beaverton. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So before the break, you were talking about how you learned a quick, hard, and fast lesson with your menu, having too many items and not being able to fulfill all of them because they're in such great demand. So can you just elaborate a little bit more on how you course corrected after that?
Yeah. So like I said, in the beginning, our menu was just too vast. There were too many things with too many like completely different recipes. There were way too many ingredients that involved, stocking, like running to Walmart at 9 p.m. and, sending my family out to everywhere at all hours because we were running out of things. And, all of that came as just this very steep learning curve right at the beginning. But then when we dialed it down to be like, okay, what has, of all of our recipes, which ones have common ingredients that are, they all are going to have flour, they all are going to have sugar, and you can sort of base it down like that. And then a lot of it was also just like, what can we do at a greater scale? Like, can we make 300 cookies at the same time? Or are we making something that's like a, like a very individual tart or something that, is hard to replicate many times? And of course, some of it, was technically more or less challenging, and all these things you sort of learn as you go of what you can make reliably and comfortably and what people want. And that's the other thing, like, as much as I have control over the menu and what we make, it's entirely dependent too on what people want. And we've always had like a very open policy of, if you want us to make something, tell us, because we will. And if you want to order something that's not on the menu, tell us, because we'll do that too.
Right.
And so it was this, you sort of had to find the balance between the give and take of what we were able to produce, reliably, comfortably, at the quality that we wanted it to be, as well as what everybody else wanted and where people want it to be spending their money, because it is a very it's a codependent relationship.
Sure. And I think I saw somewhere, maybe on your website, you have a rotating menu, so an item changes every week or something?
Yeah, that's right. So we have a couple staples that people can know, this one's my favorite, or this is the safe bet, or I can get this every time I come in. And then we also work really heavily into like local producers, like for Thanksgiving, for example, we partnered with one of the farms and we got all of our pumpkins from there, and we made like fresh pumpkin pie with whole pumpkins from the field down the road.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that part was really cool. But then we also just lean into like seasonal flavors. So we'll get into like very fruit-based in the summertime, very heavily spiced in the wintertime, like these sorts of things. And then beyond all of that, we just constantly are rotating. There's always a new flavor of something. There's always like something you haven't seen or something that we've brought back. And yeah, I mean, it works really well so far.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's also to do with what people want. So if they are requesting, something comes back. We have a couple things that we thought were going to rotate off that people were just, no, this has to be here.
It became a staple?
Yeah, we need this on the counter. So that became a staple.
And do you ever get, I don't know if this is a term, but baker's block? And not know what to make?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I am pretty good at being able to look at what we have in the kitchen and sort of determine what I think we can make within our limits. But there are definitely times where I just like, it's not coming to me, or I'm overworked, or I'm thinking about other things. And in those cases, I do all of the shop grocery shopping. So I pick all of our ingredients, by hand every week. And it is usually then when I'm physically in the store looking at everything that I'll just look for inspiration until inspiration comes.
Okay.
And usually it comes fairly quickly. Sometimes I am just wandering through wholesalers, aimlessly until inspiration strikes.
And that was going to be my next question. Do you find yourself wholesaling a lot of the product that you use to make your creations, we'll call them, or are you kind of going to the local stores and buying things at a little more of a niche level?
So both. It depends what it is. And it depends, the supply chain of just about everything's been interrupted. So there have been times that very basic things that I would normally get from wholesalers, I haven't been able to get, and I've had to go to small producers, which has been fantastic. And often that ends up bridging a relationship, and we usually stay with them.
That's great.
Once that door has been opened. And if we can partner on a local level, we pretty much always will. But there are things like our cups, for example, or our boxes, like those we wholesale out just because it's convenient and available to us. But on the ingredient level, anything we can partner with locally, we do.
Which is incredible, because I just had this vision of you wholesaling flour and all that stuff coming to your bakery, and then with the supply chain disruption, I also thought, you could, in theory, go to a bulk barn and just roll out with the pail.
Yeah, no, and like I said, especially in the early days, there were times where I was like, you just need to go anywhere that sells this ingredient that will allow us to get something, on the counter tomorrow. And there are times like that where you're just, you're in a panic and you're under a time crunch. But for the most part, we're very intentional with what we're making. We want ingredients that have been selected with integrity to begin with.
Of course.
And that's part of the trust that, our consumers and our customers are giving to us anyway. They're paying a premium for something that we're making. And the least we can do is give them a product that's made with ingredients that, are coming from somewhere accountable.
And I think that goes back to the whole concept you were talking about earlier with how your mom bakes and cooks with love, right? And then you're kind of transferring that over to how you're baking.
Oh, 100%. That was actually one of the biggest challenges in the beginning, was monetizing it.
Right.
Because it was something that I was so emotionally involved in, the thought of putting a price on that was really challenging, because it just, it felt wrong. It didn't feel ethical to be charging.
Okay.
At least in the early days. Obviously, now that there's a full-scale business,
it's different.
We have bottom lines. As much as I would love to give everyone everything I make for free, we have employees now. I'm accountable for them. I'm accountable for the things, for keeping our lights on and things like that. But it still is something that is very emotional and attached to.
So how did you decide how to price your items?
So in the early days, the pricing was based almost purely on the actual cost of what it was, because my cost to produce was very low. I was working out of my own house, so I wasn't paying rent. I wasn't paying
By
separate
proxy.
rent. Yeah. I didn't have staff. I didn't have all of these things that are now in my brick and mortar. So when the brick and mortar came, the bottom lines came. With, the parts of small business that a lot of people don't have an easy time wrapping their head around is just how many costs are associated. So there's we have an alarm company, and we have our water bills, our electric bills, like I said, our payroll, all of these. And so when we were able to run those numbers to figure out how much we should charge for something did become a little bit clearer, but the biggest challenge is volume.
Okay.
So when we were running the numbers, like I said, we were the first bakery in town, so it's not like I could look at it and think, okay, I can hope that, say, 10 people come in and each person spends $10 and I will have made $100 that day.
Sure.
Because maybe we'll have 10 people spending $10, or maybe we'll have 5, spending 30, or maybe we'll have 30 people spending $2 or $3. All of that was really challenging math to try and estimate. But in the end, it's a lot of market analysis too. It's looking at what other people charge for similar goods. It's looking at just how low we can make it while we still cover our costs.
Sure.
So it's not a very black and white answer, and it's not a very easy thing to cover. And then as cost of ingredients changes too, that sort of forces our hand to change our cost as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
So you figure out through all your market analysis and everything what to charge. How are you then getting people through the door?
So a number of things. We've been really lucky, actually. We haven't done a lot of conventional marketing.
Okay.
But we have involved ourselves in the community, and that's always been another sort of like one of our integral posts of the shop, is that I never want it to just be another business. I want it to be sponsoring bake sales at schools, and I want it to be involved in parades, and I want it to be a part of the community so much more so than just selling goods and being a producer. So that's actually been our strongest asset, has been like community involvement. And then second to that, or maybe primary to that, has been social media, has been the biggest way that we've actually been marketing and letting people know that we exist and, you know, that we're here and to come see us.
And are you doing all of that by yourself, or do you have any other help now to do the external marketing?
No, I'm you know, my family's really been fantastic, and we joke all the time that, you know, you can't choose your family and you can't choose, but if I could, I would have picked not only them, but them for their skill sets as well. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, my dad is a carpenter, so when it came to actually facilitating and building the unit, he was able to do that. And my sister works in photography and videography, and she is just like fantastic at telling stories and seeing things, you know, visually and being able to capture that. So she has run all of my social media accounts. She built my website. She built my logo. Like, she picked our brand colors. She was able to do all of that and do it so much better than, you know, I could have ever hoped to hire somebody else to do it for. And I've been just so fortunate for that. And then my mom is just the most charming person you'll probably ever meet. And so she spearheaded the front of house when we first opened.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's been really incredible.
Yeah, it's definitely incredible to hear that you have a very supportive family also fueling your dreams. Do you have a trade tip for our audience today? A piece of advice that somebody's given you, a piece of advice that you like to give others, or just a general tidbit of information you want to share with the world?
Yeah, this is so basic, but it's one of those ones that I find is just like all encompassing, and I just carry it with me. And it was someone years and years ago said to me, either do good or be good at it. And you can sort of apply that however you want. It's very open-ended, but I've always just carried it with me. And one of my like sort of key things within myself is I just want to do good. I want to do good, you know, to the people I know, to the things I'm involved with. And, you know, like I said, I carry that with me in the things that I do every day. So I think if you just carry that forward, just do good or be good at it, then, you know, you are bringing forward fortune to whatever it is that you're involved in.
I love that. Evelyn, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been another edition of Modern Business. I'm your host, Taylor Bursey, and we'll be back next time.
Call the Rogers TV Viewer Response Line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
Hey, do you like movies? You know I do. That's why I see all of them. And if you want to know which ones you should see too, check out the latest Cinema Scene reviews and interviews. They're hot, fresh, and delicious, and they're online at rogerstv.com/cinemascene, popcorn not included. This offer is available everywhere. tell your friends. Be the first on your block to click rogerstv.com/cinemascene. It's so nice, we have to mention it twice.